actually letting your yard kind of grow in a little bit, or it's actually not bad. It might not look clean, but it's one of the best things you can do to try to be like one with nature.
Welcome back to the Beet Podcast. I'm your host today, Jacques, and today we're talking about birds and birds in the garden. And we have somebody aptly named Bird Lady Drin. Welcome, Drin, onto the podcast today, who works with cool birds. And we're going to be talking about cool birds. We're going to be talking about birds in the garden, why they're actually good, and why you should actually want them in your garden, and all sorts of other fun things about birds. So I'd like to know a little bit. I see right behind you there is already a bird in view. It is a picture, but why don't you let us know what that bird is, where you're at. And I'm also curious if you have any gardening adjacency. Like, do you garden at all? Do you have any history with it in your family or anything like that?
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. I'm just sitting in the office right now. This is our bird conference room here at Global Harvest Foods, and behind me is a rose-breasted grosbeak in all of his glory. I think right now, yeah, he is eating a sunflower seed, which is one of their favorite foods. And they're one of my favorite birds. They're actually in tow. They're migrating south right now on the East Coast.
Oh,
So yeah, like right now is the middle of migration, so it's really exciting. There's like thousands and thousands of birds that are passing through, and he's probably one of them. So
that's awesome. And then how deeply, I know we were talking a little bit, but when it comes to gardening, I think you said you had some like family connection, at least in the gardening world, right?
yeah. So on my mom's side, my grandma always had like this beautiful garden, and she would take her wares to the farmers market every weekend. And she's always kind of been like a tough woman who can do and handle anything, but the second she sees one of those tomato hornworms, she about passes out. And so I remember being a little kid like, Grandma, and she'd be like, no. Gotta torture your grandparents a little bit. But
Yeah.
so I would say that was about the closest I've been in my personal life with gardening. I mean, I've always lived in apartment communities, and so I've done what I can, which has been, putting planters out with flowers and just trying to invite the hummingbirds and some of the good bugs to try to bring in the birds as well. But always, 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 it's been important to put up a bird feeder as well, because I mean, it's part of a nice, healthy ecosystem. And so even if you're in an apartment, it's kind of nice when you can to do what you can. But yeah.
Yeah, actually, there's somebody on the Epic Gardening team who lives, I think they're on the fifth floor of an apartment building in San Diego, and she put up a hummingbird feeder, and she's actually been getting hummingbirds coming up to her fifth floor balcony, like on the regular, and it's been really fun for her to have like that kind of interaction and bringing in some life, even on the fifth floor, all the way up in the sky in the middle of the city. So, birds are resilient, and I think
100%.
actually there's a lot of things that I'm curious to talk about, but one of the things that I really have grown to appreciate is that urban areas have kind of become a sanctuary for birds in a weird kind of backwards way now, where actually, if you look, I've been getting into birding pretty decently lately. A little break through the summer, but using things like Merlin and eBird, those are both like apps that help you identify birds, help you find places with birds. And you'll often find that a lot of the hot spots are right in the city, like nestled in like little parks, or like maybe there's a little pond in your backyard of like a county park, and like you'll always find something there. So I think as gardeners, it is important to remember that we aren't, I mean, obviously some people are going to just have the garden and think this is a garden for me, but your garden actually is more than you, and it is providing great sanctuary for birds throughout. And kind of one of the things that you mentioned, that was one of your favorite birds. And for me, it's actually the California towhee. I always have California towhees in my yard, and they are so much fun to watch because it's interesting. One thing that you'll learn about birds is that they eat different things.
Yeah.
They all have like their own preferences, right? Sometimes they'll eat a variety, but the towhee loves jumping around my garden, and it does this like little hop back jump
Kicks.
with its
Yeah.
like kicks
Yeah.
while it jumps back, and then like pecks,
hmm
and immediately is going for any insect it could find. So birds are always welcome in my garden because they are always doing some level of work in there.
100%.
You mentioned you're on a balcony, like you could always have bird interactions and life in an urban area, right? Like it's
100%.
not
Yeah.
exclusive.
So one thing I try to remind people is like the birds were here before all the houses and condos and they were all here first. And over the last, recent decades, their habitat has just gotten wiped out. And I mean, that's a bummer. Like we're talking about billions and billions of birds that are just poof, gone, gone. And their populations haven't really gotten a chance to like boom back. And it's really interesting to watch how certain species have really grown because it's like they thrive in urban environments, whereas others are declining. And so it's this weird, beautiful orchestra of like of what's working and what's not for different species. And like I think of the house sparrow, for example, they are invasive and are kind of a bummer, but they do so good in cities. So that's why if you live in a city, it's a pretty common bird to see. And there's some things that you can do if you don't want them around, and but a lot of people are totally fine with it because a bird is a bird, and some people think that
Yeah.
a sparrow is cool, and some people think that so if you enjoy it, that's good, that's great. But there are some things that you can do to kind of target certain species, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the house sparrow is invasive from Europe, right?
Yeah,
So it's
correct.
like invasive in the United States or North America.
Right, right.
But yeah, I'm sure everyone who's listening has seen one
Yes. And
because they
a
are
lot of
around.
yeah, they really are everywhere. And they come in hordes too. So it's like it's never just one or two, like a cardinal that's just kind of, sweetly coming by. It'll be like 50 of them and it's like, "Ah, all my seed's gone." And so, yeah, thankfully they don't really love the flavor of safflower. Safflower is like the ultimate seed when it comes to like blackbirds, or which they're not invasive, but they do hoard. But starlings, they're another one that can come in hot.
Oh, right.
And yeah, not a huge fan, or their beaks aren't quite good enough to like open up the safflowers, and they're kind of bitter for a lot of species.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
but they attract a lot of good ones. So like a lot of the finches, cardinals. I mean, I don't think you guys have any cardinals by you, but they're you
No,
have a lot
not
of beautiful
really.
birds too. Yeah.
Right now, what we see a lot of are goldfinches. Lesser goldfinches in particular right now. And I actually love having them around
They're
because
so
they do a
cute.
lot of different things in the garden.
Hmm.
I'm always shocked by how tiny they are
Yes,
and how they don't seem to bend any plants.
hmm. Yeah.
Like they just kind of exist and they love eating seeds. So anything I have in my garden that did flower and I've left, because a lot of times I don't traditionally go around deadheading religiously. Like I don't, when I say deadheading, I mean cutting back a flower after it's already bloomed, it's now making seed. And I've kind of got into a habit of leaving that specifically for the wildlife.
Oh, that's
So for
excellent.
example, I have all these cosmos. I didn't even think a cosmos seed would be attractive, but lo and behold, I left all my cosmos. Their seed pods are hanging out there, and there's little lesser goldfinches hopping all around it. I'm like, how are you not even bending the branch?
Oh my
Like,
gosh. Yeah.
you're jumping on
Yeah.
this dainty little branch.
It's
It's not
impressive.
bending. And yeah, they go through and they methodically like pick at each little seed. Of
Hmm.
course, sunflowers are really popular with things like the house finches.
Oh yeah.
Those are really common here too.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's kind of fun to see where the birds interact in your garden. And
Hmm.
I personally have found that I have plenty of birds in my garden. And I'm kind of curious as like maybe we could discuss some strategies on how you can bring birds to your garden. Because I've done a few different things through the years that I could talk about, but any tips from you? Like how would you let's talk about bringing birds into the garden and then let's convince everyone why it's a good idea. Because
Okay.
I think a lot of people are looking at birds and they're like, "Oh, I don't want that in my garden. It's only going to cause problems." But it's not true, guys. They're good for you.
Hmm. I know. Well, as you know, it's all about a balance. I mean, there are going to be birds that might cause trouble, and it can be frustrating. But for the most part, birds are a net positive. And so, if you want to invite more birds to your yard and you don't really know where to start, obviously the first place is going to be a bird feeder. So, starting with even just a tube feeder, something that's simple, honestly, something that's easy to clean, because I don't think people realize that you got to clean your feeders fairly often, like a couple of weeks or so, or if it rains and gets kind of like mushy, just,
Oh, right.
dump it out, refill it after you clean it, make sure it's nice and dry first, because we can accidentally be making our birds sick by leaving in icky seed. And so it's really important to keep them clean. But so getting yourself a bird feeder that's attractive that you like, but it's also you look at it and if you're in the store and you're kind of looking at it and you're like, okay, I think I can actually take this apart and clean it. That's what I would shoot for first and foremost.
Oh, okay.
But then after you get a bird feeder, get yourself a good bird seed. I mean, I work for Cool Birds and we make some legitimately like really, really good bird seed, like really high quality, not really any fillers, no corn or wheat products that birds don't really enjoy so much. They usually will kind of pick through and kick out all of the icky stuff that they don't like
Right.
and then get to the good stuff like the nuts and the fruit and the really good seeds. Yeah, I guess I would just suggest putting out a nice quality seed that the birds are going to eat all of. Because another thing about lesser seed is that you can often accidentally grow a lot of the seeds underneath of your feeder, and that can be another
Mm.
frustrating situation. So
Yes.
even though sunflowers are beautiful, sometimes you're like, oh, whoops, like I have a whole garden underneath of my feeder. So that's where like the no mess blends come in, and that can be kind of nice because then the birds eat all of it and it's a lot
I
less
see.
waste. And so it's like the birds are eating more pound for pound rather than like a messier blend. So that's where I stand with bird seed. The next important thing is to add a water feature, as you've mentioned in
Mm.
your videos. So
Yeah.
if you have the space or the ability to add like a pond in your yard, that would be awesome, especially with running water. But if you don't have the space or the time to care for that, something like a bird bath. And again, same with the feeders, easy to clean. If you look at it, you're like, okay, this is lightweight. I can dump it out. I can clean it. Perfect. Because once they start getting the algae and like the icky stuff, it's like, you wouldn't really want to drink out of that either. So, or bathe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, but the important thing with water features is you want the water to be moving, not just because birds are more attracted to moving water, but it can also deter insects from laying eggs and like mosquitoes and the stuff we don't really want in our gardens. So,
Yeah, we set up a little like we got a very affordable like little water pond thing, like a little stand pedestal thing. I think that was like maybe $20 or $30. I was surprised by how cheap it is. And then like a solar powered fountain pump, which again, like those are a dime a dozen nowadays, like 10, $15.
I was going to
And
say
you just throw
super
it in
cheap.
there and it just
Hmm.
pumps the water constantly and that'll
Yeah.
stop any mosquito from basically ever laying its eggs there.
Yep.
And it's actually really fun to watch the birds kind of go in there and then like bathe around, they like flap
Yeah.
their wings a little bit and like kind of bounce around in there. You'll see like bees landing to drink. That's why we put like
Hmm.
rocks in the pond or like the little water
Yes.
feature
Yeah.
so the insects can land on it, or like even butterflies and all sorts of things are just kind of going in and taking a sip. And it's just been fun to see, especially like where we are in San Diego. So, there's not abundant fresh water everywhere.
Right.
So
No,
like
exactly.
providing, yeah, these little like spots of refuge for these birds to kind of come in and take a bath, drink some water
Hmm.
has been really fun.
Yeah.
And actually, I think another important point to that is that a lot of people will struggle with things like the birds pecking their tomatoes. And commonly, what most people will say is that they're actually doing that because they're looking for water. So if you provide them with water instead, then they'll still be in your garden, but they won't be pecking your tomatoes necessarily, because if they have plenty of feed, whether that's through like a bird feeder that you put, or maybe you're growing a bunch of like sunflowers that are just leaving for the birds or anything like that, and you're providing water, then the birds will be perfectly happy to come hang out in your garden and not steal all your tomatoes.
Right.
So
No,
that's an
exactly.
important thing to remember. It's like, like you said, the birds can be a nuisance technically,
Hmm.
um, if you allow them to be, basically. I think that
Right.
there are ways around it. And some of the most easy is to just provide them with what they need.
Yeah.
And that is food, shelter, and water.
Hmm.
So for us, like, to add on to what you said, we did use some of the cool bird seed now for a few months, and it's actually been pretty nice because we have, I think, like at Kevin's house, something like 50 resident lesser goldfinches,
Oh my
and
gosh.
they just come through. They love the seed. There's house
Hmm.
finches too. I saw a common yellow throat yesterday jumping around, which I've never seen in the
Oh my
garden.
gosh. Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And then this morning, I'm pretty sure I saw the first of the yellow rumped warblers. I think they're coming back through.
Oh my
And that's usually a very
gosh.
common one here in the winter. But I could tell they had the little rump spot, but it wasn't
Hmm.
quite yellow yet. So that was cool to see this morning, and they absolutely love sunflower seeds. They
Oh
go
yeah.
nuts on the sunflower seeds. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually really curious now because we've had the feeders up through basically late spring and through summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very curious to see now that the migration's happening, like what are we going to be getting coming through our
Right.
garden?
Yeah.
Is there going to be some more unique things that we haven't seen as much before? Very rarely a Stellar's jay will kind of show up in our yard,
Ooh.
which is odd because they're usually out in the mountains here. But it's just been fun. I can't wait to see what we attract next. That's for sure. Um, because I don't know if anyone listening, if you haven't tried birding, I know I think it gets this like rap as being like an old person's game, but more and more I've been seeing a lot more younger people out there, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to spend time in nature, just kind of observing your surroundings, getting familiar with what's there, and just watching these birds. You'll see that, especially if you get a pair of binoculars, what always blows me away is that when you look at them, they have way more color and texture and like just beauty to them that we can't even like for some reason perceive from the naked eye at a distance. But every time I look at them in a binocular, I'm like, wow, you are so yellow. I did not realize that you were so vibrant. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Fox Farm Soil and Fertilizer Company, founded in Humboldt County, California in the early 80s, out of a desire to offer a different kind of garden soil that was not sterilized in any way, but instead was full of beneficial life that helps support plant growth. Today, they make incredible soils and fertilizers used and loved by gardeners all around the world. I quickly found Happy Frog soil early on in my gardening journey and have been using it ever since. Happy Frog soil is full of everything my potted plants need to thrive, including microbes plus mycorrhizae, which lead to happy roots and happy plants. It has some of my favorite amendments, including worm castings and bat guano, which help feed my plants over the next coming months without me having to add fertilizer at the start. And when it comes to perennial container gardening, I always reach for ocean forest. The inclusion of sandy loam in the mix means that won't break down over time, which means that you won't have to constantly repot those perennial plants. And not only that, but it's full of ocean-derived life that helps support and feed your plants, including kelp, fish, crab, and shrimp meal. So you don't even have to worry about fertilizing at the start. All you have to do is use it and watch your plants grow. So go to foxfarm.com and use their store locator to pick up some soil today, or maybe some fertilizer. And for added convenience, they're also available on amazon.com. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
I always say like the more you watch, the more you see. Like beyond just like the color, because of course there's nothing like seeing like a bright yellow goldfinch in your yard in the early fall, but like they're funny. They have characteristics that like they're goofy. The way if they have to scratch their head, they'll take their back foot and reach around their wing and like do like this funny little like they're hilarious. And so it's kind of fun when you've had like the same visitor and you're like, oh, that's the one, I recognize him, and they keep coming back and you almost get like a friendship going, but it might be one way, but it feels like it's their friend. But
Yeah.
it instantly sets your day off on a good note, because you can just be like walking into the kitchen with your coffee and you just take a glance outside and you can see, oh, look, my cardinal's back or my chickadees are back, and they each have their own personalities. And like chickadees crack me up because they are so fast. They are lightning fast, and they just come in, grab one seed, and they're gone just like that. And then they come back and forth and back and forth. And they do this really cool thing in the fall, like into winter, where they rewire their brain so that they're
Oh,
able to memorize, where they take, store, and cache thousands of seeds that help them survive throughout the winter. So they're just fascinating
whoa.
little birds. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, chickadees are underrated, I think.
Yeah. We don't have any chickadees like down here in like proper San Diego City. But whenever I go up to the mountains, I see them and we call them the cheeseburger bird because we have the black capped chickadees up there in the mountains. And as soon as somebody tells you the cheeseburger bird, you're like, why is it called that? And then you hear in the distance like cheeseburger. It's like
Yeah,
it just sounds like their call.
it does.
So
It
I
does.
always love hearing them, and they're
Hmm.
always really fun to watch. Like they look really silly, and they're always very like fleet-footed, like kind of darting around. But yeah, it's been fun. I have purposefully, like I mentioned, one of the ways that I like to attract the birds is by leaving plants that have flowered. So The sunflowers, I will often leave them up there for weeks and just wait for the birds to find the head once it's fully dried, and they'll go to town. If whatever they don't eat, or if they don't get to it, I just chop it off and throw it to my chickens. So there's always that benefit. And then we've been growing native garden plants in like two major sections of our yard. They're basically areas where we found like aren't great for vegetables anyway. So we might as well put something that's native. And
Right.
it's also been really interesting to see, for example, things like the white sage, which will grow. It'll look like really big and nice, and then it'll basically die towards the end of summer and start like going deciduous, drought deciduous, because it's like a native adaptation. But in the process, it has all these seed heads. And every time, once the seed heads are dry, that thing is covered in birds, whether it's the lesser goldfinches or also bush tits, which are really fun.
Yeah.
They have a really funny name too, but I'll be laying under the mulberry tree, like on a hammock, and I just all of a sudden hear all this like peeping. I look up and there's like 40 bush tits like crawling through all the leaves, like pecking at little insects and bugs and kind of cleaning it up. So it's amazing what simply doing nothing can do to attract the birds.
Yeah.
Like just let your plants sit there and let
Hmm.
them produce seed, and you'll see who will come and eat it. If you can't do that, then you can get started with a feeder and start attracting birds to your yard. And from there, I've noticed even like Kevin's yard's always had birds, but now since we've added the feeders, there have been more birds.
Hmm.
And they have also been visiting the other flowers and plants around the garden as well. So that's been really cool to see.
I do try to suggest that, yeah, letting your yard kind of become wild a little bit, like chopping things down and leaving them, because you're talking sparrows and they're going to be digging up all sorts of stuff under the ground, getting at the bugs. They might even find it as a nice roost or a nesting area. So actually letting your yard kind of grow in a little bit, or it's actually not bad. It might not look clean, but it's one of the best things you can do to try to be like one with nature
Yes.
if your area isn't. So a lot of homes you're like, yeah, there's American robins, and they're common all throughout the whole United States, but they they're kind of a species that if your lawn is kind of more on the basic side, they visit pretty often. But I mean, they're great. They're great because they eat up worms. They eat some insects. They eat in the wintertime. They eat the berries that are up in the tree that are left over. But so it's interesting how as the seasons change, even one species can change its natural history and how it eats, like where it lives and how it groups together versus being more solitary. And so, yeah, but when it comes to living, another thing that would be great to add to your yard if you have the space is a birdhouse. And we could really get into that too, because it's really exciting. It's not something I have personally been able to do because I live in apartments, but as soon as I get a house someday, that's going to be the first thing I do because you can attract bluebirds and wrens and chickadees and I mean, you name it. So it's really exciting. Yeah.
I will say first that you just gave everyone permission to not have a perfect garden. Like it's
Exactly.
fine. Leave
That's your
that
goal.
pile of stuff there. And just if somebody asks like, "Oh, why aren't you cleaning that up?" Be like, "Wow, you want me to destroy this habitat? How
For the
dare you?"
birds.
And then
Yeah.
you can just say like, "I'm building nature here, guys. Like
Yeah.
if you don't like it, you
Yeah.
could leave." And I've noticed too, like this wasn't intentional when we first came to this yard. It just already had a lot of sort of hedges and plants that are on the periphery, like right up
Hmm.
against the boundary of the yard, and that's been amazing. So every time if I go into the garden, like the main garden, obviously the birds will like kind of fly away. They don't really want you like stomping around near them, but they won't fly away. They'll fly
Right.
into the trees and into the bushes
Hmm.
around my garden. So they feel
Right.
safe enough to stay in the area instead of
Hmm.
like if all I had was like a lawn and then my garden and then just empty
Like
walls
a
all
fence.
around, they
Yeah.
would fly away because there
Hmm.
would be nowhere to hide. But I have plenty of like random hedges and trees that are kind of bushy up top that the birds just dive into and hide. So that's been a really great addition too, is to try to think of kind of the edges of your area as a great way to make use of for habitat. And it could be beautiful things. It doesn't have to be something bird specific. It could just be like a bush that you like or a tree that you like, and just it gives them somewhere to go and somewhere to hide. So that's like a really important thing as well. So if we're thinking like the three things, the food, shelter, water, let's talk a little bit more about the shelter because I am curious about the birdhouses. I actually built a wren birdhouse that I put right on the outside of the shed here. I haven't checked to see. I know it takes a while sometimes for the birds to like get familiar,
Hmm.
but I'd love to hear a little bit more about anything about birdhouses, really.
Yeah. So birdhouses are exciting because they, I don't want to say they're complicated because I don't want to deter anyone, but come with their own complexities. So certain shapes can attract certain species. So if you have a box that's, pretty tall, standard like this, and it's got a slight, it kind of goes down a little bit in the front. That way the rain can go off. And usually there's some holes up top for ventilation because they can get kind of hot in there.
Oh yeah.
Also adding a little bit of like a buffer at the bottom that can help keep moisture from getting, soak in the bottom of
Mm.
the nest because that's when you get bugs and mites and stuff that can really propagate that you don't want. And so that's really as far as the size of it. Now, the hole, that can actually be more species like dependent. So if you want to attract smaller species like swallows or wrens or chickadees or bush tits, you can have like a 1 inch hole. That way it's just the size of the bird that can fit in, maybe an inch and a quarter. I wouldn't really go more than an inch and a half because much bigger than that, and you might be inviting birds like starlings. And starlings are known to kick out other birds from their nests, which is kind of a bummer. And so we want
Yes.
to try to help, native species as much as we can. Now, the house sparrow is probably enemy number one when it comes to house with having nest boxes. So I usually say inch and a quarter, inch and a half size, and then if you see house sparrows and they are, starting to bring grasses and nesting material, if there's a door that opens on the side, just clean it out. Just clean it out as soon as you see them building a nest, and then you might have to do that every day for a week or two, and it's kind of like exciting, but also like you're like, you're it feels like you're doing something bad, but you're not. You're actually helping native species find a nest spot.
Okay.
So that and one more interesting thing is keeping the opening, the hole of the nest box facing east, so facing the rising sun. That's something a lot of species enjoy because it's, just like us. We like to have an alarm clock in the morning, and it just kind of it helps them with their, circadian rhythm and that or a little bit more south leaning because north facing winds can be kind of cold, especially in the winter. And
Yeah.
birds don't only use nest boxes for nesting, they also use them for roosts in the winter. And so if you have it kind of east or southeast facing, that's going to be the most ideal location for a nest box. Yep.
That's cool. I accidentally did that without realizing. I put it on this wall, which is kind of southeast. So that's great. And actually, there was that website, nestwatch.org, where I found the like sort of plans and design for the birdhouse that I built. And I was actually surprised, much like you mentioned, even like the difference between like a 1 inch opening versus like a 1 1/8 inch
Uh-huh.
can like invite like one wren versus like another wren. So
Uh-huh.
like it gets like that specific in terms of like how dialed in you want to get on the exact bird you want to attract. And I think the other thing that we haven't really even touched on at all is that there are birds that eat seeds, and then there are birds that eat seeds and other things like omnivores, but there's also birds that are like purely essentially insectivores or like 90% plus. And those are the ones that you really want to have in your garden. At least I'm
Absolutely.
always happy to have in my garden. And there's this, I can never remember the number, but there's this famous study of like a family of chickadees where the researcher counted like how many times the mom and dad chickadee left the nest to come back and to raise a baby chickadee, and it was something like 1,500 caterpillars per baby. So
That's
imagine,
astounding.
yeah, imagine you're out in your garden and you're mad because you found another cabbage looper on your cabbage or on your kale and it's eating all your leaves. And now imagine a baby bird nest just got built, and now there's a chickadee coming in and swooping up all of those caterpillars. And I see it all the time. I see the California towhee jumping around on my kale plant and flying away with a little green caterpillar at least once a week. And
That's
that means
amazing.
I don't have to spray anything. and I don't have to do any work. And now my kale has less holes and the birds get to eat. So there's tons of these other, like, birds are, yes, they're very cool. I love seeing birds. I love watching them, but they can also be very beneficial to your garden in a lot of different ways. And one of the other birds that I see on a regular basis is the black phoebe. It'll usually sit on the fence or on like a power line, and it'll swoop down, catch like a fly, and then fly back up. And then just kind of do that over and over. And it'll catch all sorts of annoying insects that you don't want buzzing around your face all day. There's so many good reasons to call these birds in. And you could get very specific, like we mentioned with these birdhouses. The one that I built is specifically for attracting wrens. And wrens are birds that eat insects. And I see them jumping around my garden all the time as well. So that's kind of where it comes down to, is that the ones that eat seeds, they're really fun, and they're also beneficial. They could help clean up your garden a bit, and they're just nice to have around, because the more life you have in your garden, the more other life you have. So it's kind of like a compounding thing, I think. It's like you always want more life in your garden. Nobody wants less life in their garden, I guess, except for maybe squirrels and maybe rats. And occasionally I get mad at the skunks for digging up my garden looking for grubs, but at least they're eating grubs. So you know, it's like, I'll take it. I'll take it. But yeah, like, I think I do want to mention, because I do think it is interesting, is that some of the cool birdseed that we did use over this past summer was the Hearts on Fire, which was sunflower coated in capsaicin, like spice, essentially like spicy chili power. And the cool thing is that birds, you might have heard this throughout some sort of biology class, but birds don't taste spice. They could eat the hottest pepper in the world and they're unfazed. They could do the hot ones challenge, no problem, because they really don't taste any spice. So if you get the seed that you cover in spicy substance, and now a squirrel tries to eat it, that squirrel is going to have a rude awakening, because it does not like spice.
No. And I mean, I believe that birds and peppers actually kind of evolved alongside each other.
I believe that. I think that's true.
And so it's great, because we have like these birds that are almost working for us in the garden, and all we have to do is, just kind of give them the other things that they need to stay there. And yeah, squirrels, I can tell you firsthand, also from physically packing the bags, it's spicy. And we as mammals also do not tolerate spicy so well, unless, it's something yummy. But there's always going to be those freak squirrels out there that are just like, oh yeah, but for the most part, bring it, exactly. But for the most part, it really does work quite well, and deterring or discouraging squirrels and rats, raccoons. But I had someone ask me about bear, and I was like, that's a great question. Like,
yeah, I feel like a bear is going to eat if it wants to eat.
It's going to do
but
it.
I don't know. I haven't seen it. Someone we know had bird feeders for a long time, and they kind of slowed down because they were having a lot of rats eating their garden. And the simple act, that was before they didn't even know that there was like the seed you could get. But even the simple act of just bringing it in at night seemed to basically solve the problem, because obviously, like, most of the birds that are eating seeds are not doing that at night. And guess who is? The rats are. So if you take that away at night, and just put it away and then hang it up in the morning, that can also solve your problem pretty easily. So I do want to say that, because, nobody wants to attract other things to the garden that they don't want, even though more life is generally always better. And I will also say, one of the great things that I see is that every spring, especially in the early season, we have a couple red-shouldered hawks that nest in the trees around our neighborhood. And so they'll be like screeching all day, and I don't mind it, but I definitely don't mind it when I come by and I see a hawk fly out of my garden and it's holding onto either a rat or a gopher, and I'll just jump up on the power line and just like eat it. So I love that. I'm like, please come on in, hawks all day, fly through, because that is the system that, like, the natural ecosystem. That's what those birds eat. Some of those hawks will naturally go towards those kind of rodents and small kind of critters, and they will also help keep squirrels and other things off and away from your garden. One of the other things, back to bird boxes or nests, is I've seen some people build like barn owl boxes, but I know that they could take a long time to get established. But once they do, then you have a barn owl in your neighborhood, and that's going to be hunting rats, mice, squirrel, anything that moves at night. It's going to find it and it's going to get it and it's going to control your problem. And I've even seen
Absolutely.
farms, like farms will add these bird boxes of birds that like to eat insects, and also owl boxes specifically for the reason that they could do a lot of the work for you. And I also want to mention that if you are going around spraying pesticide in your garden, and you're killing all these caterpillars, then there won't be any birds to come eat your caterpillars because they
Exactly.
need food. That's why they're there.
Yep.
And so, I will occasionally spray like something like Bacillus thuringiensis, which only kills caterpillars, on like a targeted thing, like literally my cabbages in the middle of winter when it seems like the birds are not eating them as much. But beyond that, I let everything ride, and the birds kind of come in and clean up on their own. I've even seen birds eat aphids, like peck them off the plant one by one.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
just
kind of cute because it's like
give
yum
nature a
yum
chance. Yeah,
yum.
exactly.
Exactly.
Give the birds a chance. Like they're hungry, they're willing to work, and they don't ask for that much in return.
Right.
Uh, it's just been really fun to see.
Yeah.
And so if we're kind of thinking of like other things or other ways of attracting the birds in your garden, I do want to kind of go back to this idea of like the migration, because one of the fun things, if you become attuned to birds in your garden, is that you will start to notice that they do change throughout the year, right? So like what's like the very basics of like a bird migration? Like I think most have like a common north-south vibe, right?
So, yeah, I mean, for the most part, most of the birds are going to be going from north to south this time of year. But there actually are some species, especially like in the north or the east, where some of the birds actually might be going like they shift. Some might be shifting thousands of miles, some might be shifting as small as a neighborhood. And so a migration can be huge or it can be pretty subtle. Like some finches will do like a little shift, a little subtle shift here and there. But
Oh, okay.
other, and then some of them will have eruptions. So it all depends on which resources are available. So let's say a crop does really, really well, you might have a huge boom of siskins. Or let's say, the opposite is true and it was a really, really rough summer, it was a drought. You might not be seeing so many of a species that you're used to seeing. And so that's kind of one of the exciting things about birding is every
Yeah.
season and every year is truly different. And so, yeah, and on top of that, then you have the birds that don't migrate at all, like cardinals. They're actually very local. They stay within like a quarter mile. They don't really fly very far. So it's kind of cool. You know that the cardinals that are there in the summer are probably going to be the same pair that are there in the middle of winter. And so
Oh, that is
yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah.
That is
And
nice.
it's just fun. And so if you get yourself like a bird book, or just it doesn't have to be anything too fancy, but you can kind of go through and you can look at they usually have the range maps, and it'll show like where they live versus where they migrate. And it's really eye-opening because some birds, they're just constantly on the move. It's like they nest, and then aside from that, they're on the move all year long. Like I think of juncos, for example. They are fun little winter birds. I don't know if you get juncos in your
Oh
area.
man.
Yeah.
We see dark-eyed juncos all the time. I like them. I think they're really fun. They look funny. They're like little tiny little ball kind of
Yeah,
bird.
yeah. They kick around on the
And they
ground.
make funny sounds. Yeah, they kick
Yeah.
around. I'm like, I see these guys everywhere. I see them down here in San Diego, like in a marsh. I see them up in like Mammoth Mountain at like 10,000 feet, all in the same like week. And I'm like,
So
you guys are
cool.
just wherever you want to be, that's where you are. And
Birds are
those dark-eyed
resilient.
juncos, they are resilient and they
Hmm.
are numerous as well. They're really fun to watch. But yeah, it's really fun for us. Because the first year we started birding was kind of fall winter, and here in San Diego there's a lot going on fall winter. And then this past summer was kind of our first full summer through as like birding people. And I was like, wow, there's not as much as I thought there would be. I was so used, because like now I'm paying a lot more attention to everything around me. And there's always, like I mentioned, the California towhees are probably like the cardinals. It's probably the same couple that I see all year, every year. And then the black phoebes, I always see them every year. Hummingbirds all the time.
So cool.
Um, But then you start to see these like now American goldfinches start showing up, and maybe like some siskin will fly by or something. But we usually do a lot of shorebird stuff because here in San Diego, there's always birds
Oh
when there's
yeah.
always a shoreline, basically.
Hmm.
Uh, but even that changes throughout the year, and it's so much fun to kind of not just be aware of like the nature, but to be aware of what's literally around you, like to
Oh yeah.
be aware of the ecosystem that you live in and that you're a part of has been very exciting and kind of fun to just understand, because you might see some of these birds out there and you're like, how could I attract that to my garden? And maybe you can't. Like maybe you're not going to get like a curlew with its big ol' like foot long beak digging in the
Yeah.
sand looking for stuff. That's not going to come to my garden. There's no
Probably
reason
not.
for it to be here. But I might be able to attract some other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of always the goal. So I would always encourage, again, on the food, water, shelter, having native plants, fantastic to attract native birds. They are familiar with those plants. They want to eat those plants. They want to eat those seeds. They might use them for nesting material or literally nest within those plants. I always recommend that. Letting your flowers just kind of sit around and going to seed, I would always recommend.
Be a little lazy.
If you, yeah, exactly. Be a little lazy. Like you said earlier, like leave piles of stuff. Every time I've gone to like a bird sanctuary, you will see piles of like branches, leaves, sticks, and they do that to attract insects there and also to attract like roosting and like little nesting areas, and that's great. And you don't have to put it out in the open. You could put it on the edge of your garden. In
Yeah.
fact, maybe even better because you don't. They're not going to be as comfortable in the main area you're always walking through. Providing that cover, getting some of those plants on the edges, taller stuff, somewhere for them to hide when you come into the garden, so you don't even have to feel bad about scaring them away. Um, Adding a bird feeder, adding bird baths. There's so many different ways of bringing these birds in and keeping them there, and you know, having them do work for you. Like I said, like I've over the years at the beginning, I started off like I think most new gardeners trying to fight everything, spray this, spray that, kill everything. And I was like, this is ridiculous. A, it doesn't work. And B, I'm like, I don't want to be using this stuff. And C, I don't want to kill everything.
Right.
So
No, exactly.
just stop doing that. And just by stopping that action alone, you will see more things in your yard. At first, it'll be painful because your plants will look a little bit sad. But once those birds find out that they've got a like buffet there, they will show up and they will clean up for you.
Yeah, it's kind of like replacing some of the disorder with the beauty and color and song that you get from birds. And of course, they eat up the bugs for you, which is super helpful. That way you don't have to spray as much, and it's just a great overall ecosystem booster by inviting birds in.
Yeah. And then another thing I want to mention is if you think that you don't see birds in your garden, then you might not be an early bird, in the literal sense. Because one thing that I've learned is that, yes, there are birds that'll be around kind of all day. But if you really want to see birds, then you have to get up around dawn,
Yep.
as early as possible. As
Hmm.
soon as it's like an hour after the sunrise, a lot of bird activity kind of like plummets. And you'll be shocked by how many more birds you see early in the morning. So I encourage at least trying it, even if you're not a morning person. You might be surprised by how much you hear and how much you see by getting out there nice and early.
Sometimes in the evening as the sun is setting, if you're
Yes,
not an early riser,
that's the
sometimes
second
just,
one.
yeah, if you're making dinner or something and the sun is setting, that's an excellent time to be like, okay, quick check. Like, do we have any birds outside right now? And yeah, it's kind of a delight when you're like, oh, it's like 8 p.m. and there's my cardinal just cheering away on the feeder. And it's like it's just,
Yeah,
so
it's interesting. They're
hmm
morning and they're like it's basically sunrise, sunset. Those are
right,
your
right.
prime birding hours, like the hour after sunrise or up to the hour after and the hour like before, like into twilight. That's when you're going to see a lot of action and a lot of activity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I would encourage you guys, if you are interested in this, is to get a pair of binoculars. Um, this is not a binocular podcast, but I would go somewhere, try to maybe spend a little more than you want, because it's really crazy how much of a difference it makes, even up to like $100 to $200 range, and then mess around with the apps like Merlin and eBird. Merlin has been critical for me in actually understanding and learning the birds around me, because you'll see a bird and it's like, of course, like we all see birds every day, but it's so hard to look at that bird and be like, what is that? Now I have to like write down all this stuff. Like, what color was it?
Right. Or
How
the sound
many
ID.
feathers did it have? The
So
sound ID is
helpful.
amazing because
Yeah.
with Merlin, you just hold up your phone. If it chirps or sings a song, it'll be like, boom, it's this bird. Uh, and that's how I've learned basically probably 90% of the birds that I've learned now because it's so much easier than going through like a checklist and
Having
a
a book
chart.
and being like, ah!
Yeah, I know. And then the bird
bird's
flies
gone.
away. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Yep.
using the sound stuff. And then also I'll mention I have a haiku box
Ooh, okay.
in my garden.
Mhm.
And that's like a 24/7 monitoring, basically
listens,
like a
right?
Merlin station.
Yeah.
It just listens and it keeps track of all the birds. And I get like this data, I get like graphs and stuff. It's really fun for me to like geek out on.
Yeah.
But it's just cool too because I'm like, wow, I thought I heard that bird. Like I've been hearing what I think is an owl, but I never see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it got picked up by my haiku box. And I'm like, okay, now I know. Like I feel like 98% sure that that owl exists in my neighborhood. And that makes me happy. So having birds in the garden, I'd say always a plus. That's my take.
Good. Is there any which bird would you say was unexpected? Do you have any that have visited your garden that you were like, oh, cool?
This is like so deep cut. But it was what was it? I think it was like a Nashville warbler.
Oh,
And we were like, that shouldn't be here.
no.
It really shouldn't, like based on any maps or anything. But we saw it. It had like this little eye ring that was like that bird has. And also the sound ID picked it up. And we were like, oh, that's
Double
cool.
confirmed.
Like if we didn't have that sound ID, like I'd have been like, I don't know, like some bird that I can't figure out that shouldn't be here. So that's another great thing. And then this year I've been seeing, I know they're around San Diego always, but I've seen hooded orioles in my garden a few times.
My God.
And I love that. They're really fun birds. They look
Beautiful.
very dramatic.
Very.
They're kind of like golden yellow and they're like black spots and they're like big old beak. So that's been really fun to see this year. And I never see them for long, but I definitely have seen them. And they've definitely jumped around in my garden. So that also makes me happy because maybe they'll come back through looking for whatever they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite bird, I'm going to say, is the California towhee just because he's always around and they're just always fun to watch. And then what was your favorite bird? Was it the grosbeak? Or
Oh my goodness. My favorite backyard.
if I put you on the spot?
Let's see. This is really tough. I mean, so my daughter's name is Wren. Carolina wrens have always had like a special spot. Wrens just across the board,
I like
hands
wrens.
down, they're beautiful. They're so silly and goofy, but their songs carry for miles. I mean, they're beautiful. And
It's crazy how
but
small they are too.
I know they're just like
So
little,
loud.
so loud, and they're very early risers. So they'll get up and they're, you hear tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, and it's like 4 a.m. But I mean, gosh, they're beautiful, and they're insect eaters, so they're great for
Yeah.
gardens. And
Yeah.
but chickadees they're just acrobats. They're fun. Nuthatches, same thing. I mean, and they flock together too a lot of the times.
Oh, interesting.
And on top of that, certain species like we have the blue jays and chickadees, they're like alarm systems for the neighborhood. So if there's a hawk or a predator or something, a snake maybe, they will let the whole neighborhood know. And so it's really cool how they work as like a society. And so, yeah, I mean, like we said before, like the more you watch and the more you kind of pick up on, the more you're like, okay, I get it. This is really
Yeah.
cool. Like,
Yeah. And you
so
start seeing like a little mating dance between birds.
yeah,
Like you're like, what are they doing? And then you're like, oh wait, that bird keeps trying to chase that other bird around and like do a little dance around. But yeah, I agree. Wrens are really fun. I love that their like tail feathers like stick up like at this like little sharp angle.
yeah.
And I'm still holding out to see a marsh wren. They're so like they always disappear. You could hear them every time you're near a marsh. But there's this picture that's like on the ID app where its legs are like holding on to like two like marsh
Side.
strands. It's like doing the splits. I'm like, oh man, I need to see that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I still haven't, but I'm still hunting for that. That's the thing with birding is like, even though like I know I've seen that bird in like fleeting glances and I've heard it, I want to see it doing like a specific thing and like the interaction of it around the environment. There's always more, like even if I see the same birds over and over again, it's still interesting and fun just because, like you said, the more you watch, like the more you see.
hmm
They give you more reasons to kind of like these birds. And I will like birds and appreciate birds for the rest of my life now, which I'm happy. It's so weird how before I even got into birding. Because I was gardening for years before I even got into birding. But now that I'm going to be a lifelong gardener, and I'm going to be a lifelong birder for sure.
Yay.
Because I appreciate both. And the coolest thing, one of my favorite things about, one more thing about birding, is that you could take that hobby wherever you go. Anywhere in the world you travel, there's birding. And it's even more exciting because there's birds that you haven't seen. And all you have to bring is a pair of binoculars or nothing, and you could still go birding. But it's such a lightweight hobby that you could literally do anywhere you are. Even if you're like
accessible.
in a random town and you're like waiting for something, you could bird around you. It's a fun way to explore the world and kind of learn the ecosystems in the different parts that you're in. So
100%. And you don't have to be like
get
an
out there and
expert
bird, guys.
at all.
No,
you
not at
can
all.
literally be like, oh, it's a brown bird. Cool. And that's where it starts. So you don't have to know, the whole scientific name or anything. It's just everybody starts somewhere. And you can be 5, you can be 105. It doesn't matter. It's so awesome. And like you said, anywhere in the world, it's for everybody.
Yeah, when you get into a group of people birding and like they're like, oh my God, look, there's the tricolored heron, and people are like, oh my God, I haven't seen that yet, and they get so excited. It's addicting. It's like a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I know. I'm like, man, the retired crowd got in and they were hiding the secret of birding.
Yeah.
They were trying to keep everyone away. Not really.
I was going to say, people say that it's like a grandparent sport, and I'm like, they were on to something, and they're keeping the secret hidden, and now it's out. I mean,
it's out.
Yeah. But yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on today and talking about birds and geeking out on birding. I hope everyone at home appreciates birds more and more and realizes that they are good in the garden and they're fun and interesting, and that you could have them work for you. You just have to get the food, water, shelter situation figured out. And I think we provided with everyone with plenty of like tips and advice on how to do just that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thanks for coming on, Drin.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.